Well, grace and peace. My name is Paul Dezay. Welcome to Find the Intersection. Today's passage in the second week of Advent is Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 to 11. Philippians 1, 3 to 11. So go read that if you haven't already. Read it in a couple translations and then come back here and we'll chat about it. All right, Philippians 1, 3 to 11. See ya. Well, welcome back. Hey, let's jump into Philippians 1, 3 to 11. Let's start with the context. We have a guy named Paul, years after Jesus. It becomes a disciple of Jesus, a follower of Jesus, and is radically preaching the gospel everywhere he goes, planting churches. But because of the gospel, because of his preaching in the Roman Empire, he finds himself in prison on death row, and he writes this letter to one of the churches that he founded, a church in Philippi, and that's what we got going on in this letter. Paul's in prison. He's writing to a church that he planted, and he loves them and is praying for them. So that's the context. A few things that jumped out to me as I read this passage today. First is the term partnership. In several of the translations that I read, it referred to partnership between Paul and this church. See, Paul knew these people. These people loved Paul. There was this loving relationship. And these people in this church invested in Paul. They sent him a gift of money, and that provided food for Paul when he was in prison. In those days, prisoners had to provide their own food. And so this church sent this gift in a very risky way, traveling all this way to give it to Paul. And so they had a partnership. The Greek word is koinonia, can be translated fellowship, but really it's more partnership or sharing, shareholders. It's investment. And this church was invested in what Paul was doing, and Paul loved them, and he starts the letter with thanksgiving, and there's joy, and you can definitely tell he loves these people. So partnership. Now, as I read that, I was thinking about myself and asking the question, am I a partner in the gospel? Am I a partner with my local church? Am I a partner in preaching the gospel around the world? I don't want to just be sitting in a pew. I want to be invested. At least that's the challenge I sense in this particular passage. Another thing that jumped out to me is the day of Christ. That phrase is in verse 6 and verse 10, so it's in there twice in this passage. The day of Christ refers to the second coming of Jesus. So this church is waiting for the second coming, and Paul's encouraging him. Now, when we think of the second coming, many of us think of the doom and gloom, but the tone of this letter is not doom and gloom at all. It's very joyful. It's a very positive tone in this message. And so the second coming, they're waiting for the second coming. But it doesn't seem like they're just sitting around waiting. Paul's encouraging them in this idea of participation while they wait in the kingdom work, the gospel. So the day of Christ. Now we, as people, are waiting for the second coming of Jesus, and it's not doom and gloom. We're positive, anticipating, excited about the second coming, and we should be joyful, but not just sitting back and waiting as in passive, but really actively waiting, partnering together, participating and growing. And we should be encouraged as we read this section in Philippians. And finally, Paul is praying for overflowing love for this group in this church. Overflowing love that would overflow more and more and more and more, and they would grow in insight about what's truly important, and they would be found pure and blameless. And all those ideas are connected. Paul is praying that this group would love one another and love God and reach out in love to their city, and they would recognize what's truly important. In our very distracted world, I mean, there's some things that I give a lot of time to, a lot of social media and things like that can be very much a distraction. Paul is praying for this group of people that they would understand what is truly important, what is the highest priority, and invest our time and our talents and treasures in the things that are most important, that they would be found pure and blameless. And that comes out of this idea of love. It doesn't seem like this is a moral police type of thing. it really does seem like that God, that Paul is praying that they would, their love would overflow for one another, and that's what is going to make them pure and blameless as Christ comes back. All right, those are some things that jumped out to me. There's so much beautiful stuff in this passage. I'm curious what God spoke to you about. So as you read Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 to 11, if you would comment some things, words or phrases or ideas, and thanks for commenting on yesterday's video. And then tomorrow, we're going to come back with Malachi, or as I like to say, the Italian prophet Malachi. So join us for Find the Inner section tomorrow. Grace and peace. See ya.